Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with ForgeRock and HYPR. And we're going to be discussing the passwordless decade. So just some housekeeping for everyone. There is a live chat box, so please, if you have any questions, submit your questions, and at the end, during the questions and answers session, we'll go through them. And the presentation and the slides will be available, so they should be in the attachments section. And you will also be receiving a copy of the presentation if you've signed up for it. And of course, feedback is an absolute gift. So at the end of the session, if you can please fill out the survey and let us know how we went, that would be fantastic. So today we're going to be talking with Bojan and Johan. So Bojan Simic is from HYPR. He's currently the Chief Technology Officer and one of the co-founders of HYPR as well. And he's been within the cybersecurity industry for quite some time, and an absolute passion for deploying cryptography implementations across security critical software. And look, Johan is with us at ForgeRock, and we're very, very happy to have him. He's got more than 25 years of experience within the high-tech industry, and he brings insight, innovation to ForgeRock and our customers across the digital identity marketplace. And I am Chris Plewer, and I look after our tech partners and our delivery partners across Australia and New Zealand. And so look, a little bit about ForgeRock. You know, we're a late stage startup. We've got over 1,000 enterprise customers and we've got 600 employees and consistently growing. You know, we play in a very, I think, a very good market in the IT sphere with identity, and it's consistently growing along with our market share. And we're headquartered in San Francisco, but with offices across the globe, including in Sydney and in Singapore. And we're really starting to get some attention from our peers in the industry with a couple of awards that we've won this year. And I'll hand it over to Bojan to give it a bit of introduction around HYPR.
Thank you, Chris. So Bojan Simic here. Great to be here. Great to be speaking with everyone at 10 p.m. Here in New York City. If you're not familiar with HYPR, we are a company that does only one thing, and that is true passwordless security. So we help businesses, primarily large organizations, get rid of passwords once and for all. We are a venture capital-backed company. We have some really great investors, including MasterCard and Samsung. We have tens of millions of users authenticating with HYPR every single day, and we are based in New York City primarily, but we also have a presence in Tokyo as well as London for the international folks. So it's a pleasure to be speaking with everyone today and presenting.
So thanks very much for that, Bojan. So look, we're going to go through 3 questions today, and then the questions and answers at the end. And the first one is for you, Bojan. How has authentication evolved?
Yeah, that's a great question. So authentication has an interesting history, but we're just going to look at it today for the last 60 years. So this will be kind of a speed round of authentication history. But it really started in 1961 by a gentleman called Fernando Corbato, and he was a researcher at MIT, and he initially decided to, on the very early computing system, he wanted to provide a way to secure files for the different members of the faculty. And he came up with this thing called a password, where you could, go to the computer lab and type in the password to access your files. And this was the origin of the password in computing. And it's just interesting how 60 plus years later, we're still primarily using authentication mechanisms that are built on that. We've tried various approaches to build on top of it and secure it. We've all used RSA tokens. I've personally been in situations where I have 3 or 4 different RSA tokens in my bag, multiple apps with SMS and 2-factor authentication codes. And really everything that we have done in the authentication industry and the identity industry over the last several decades has been to build on top of the password. The unfortunate thing is that the password is fundamentally broken. So we see all of these issues with credentials. We see all the friction with users, and it's not a good situation. But the good news is there are alternative options available now, and many other businesses over the last couple of decades have tried to kill the password, and not many have succeeded. And today we'll talk about some of the ways and mechanisms and technologies that luckily exist that can finally provide organizations with the capability to, move beyond the password and no longer rely on this legacy form of authentication to access our security critical systems. So yeah, that's really the evolution of authentication as we see it today.
And Johan, do you think that removing passwords would leave certain user groups behind? I mean, what about those that don't have a smart device?
So I think it comes down to having a platform that allows you to implement passwordless capabilities in a stepwise fashion. You need to consider your whole user population and make sure you don't leave anyone behind. And with modern technologies, you have the ability to provide choice in how users authenticate. We want to steer everybody to use passwordless, but it's not going to happen just by flicking a switch. We need to start today, but we also need to recognize that our customers may have devices that are not suitable, or other objections to switching from a device they know. So steering them in the right direction in a flexible and configurable manner is key to make this journey successful.
Yeah, so thanks for that response. The second question for today is, why do you think that credential reuse is at an all-time high?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. So, unfortunately, credential reuse is bigger than ever. And one of the things that we've seen is account takeover fraud. So if you're not familiar with credential reuse, every couple of weeks or every couple of months, we see some big news headline that says, this business lost 200 million credentials, usernames and password for their users. And one of my favorite massive credential breaches is, I believe, from 2012, when LinkedIn got breached, and it only took a few years for security researchers to crack all those hashed passwords from LinkedIn. I think now about 98% of them have been successfully cracked. So the fact that we see all of these mass credential breaches, all of these instances where not just passwords, but other shared secrets keep getting breached. If you remember back in 2011 when RSA got breached and they had to replace millions and millions of those RSA tokens, every single mechanism that relies on shared secrets contributes to the credential reuse problem. So this is why we see account takeover fraud, doubling year over year. Unfortunately, we see, billions of malicious login attempts, across our most critical systems such as banking and insurance and e-commerce. And the reason that this happens is, because it's so easy. Most businesses these days that, have as part of their digital transformation initiatives, they've taken things and technologies and software and the things that they used to build and keep traditionally inside the firewall. They've taken these systems and put them out on the internet. They've moved them to AWS, they moved them to Azure, they moved them to GCP. And as they move these services outside of the enterprise, anybody can try to access them. So if you had a workforce application such as your human capital system like on-premise, and then you suddenly move to something like Workday, anybody can try to access your Workday account because it's open to the internet. And the technology is such that these days, malicious users have found ways to automate the bypass of traditional two-factor authentication methods. So this is why we see SMS two-factor authentication being deprecated by security standards and security practitioners. This is why we see very low-skilled hackers being able to weaponize millions of stolen passwords against any website. And the cost of attack for adversaries is so low, and the cost of defending an infrastructure is so high for the enterprise that it's very difficult to justify keeping the password around.
And Johan, how can identity access management be used to minimize some of these attacks?
I think that there are a couple of things here that are really important to highlight. One is that the IAM solution needs to be aware of the context, be able to take in signals related to the interaction and use that for decision-making purposes, to whether allow access or deny, or sort of make a redacted type of response. So that is one aspect of it. The other part is that the ability to integrate passwordless technologies is fundamental in a way. So the ease of being able to leverage technologies for passwordless by simply, like with HYPR, doing a simple integration with the ForgeRock platform is something that will allow you to start embarking on the passwordless journey quickly. And by doing that quickly, by starting today, you are going to eliminate a huge amount of that attack surface that the shared credentials are guilty of, so to speak. And there's another part I think is interesting as well. It is not just human users that have passwords. We have such a proliferation of IoT devices that come with pre-configured weak passwords with a little sticker on the box of your, let's say, a home device that you get from your provider, saying the admin username is this and the password is that. I think that is also one of the next frontiers that we need to address in combination with eliminating the human password as well. And looking at industry initiatives, like we see in the FIDO Alliance, that has been fundamental and is defining the underlying technologies, it is really good to see how they are also addressing the IoT segment as such. So I think there are two main parts here: eliminating the human user password, obviously, but also starting to address the IoT market as well. Boyan, what's your view on that IoT angle?
Yeah, every single time even in my own home, every single time I look around, it seems like there's a new IoT device around. And if I go outside, it's 1,000 times more. And so the more technology that we surround ourselves with, the more passwords we unfortunately surround ourselves with, and the more static credentials we encounter, and it's really something that needs to change. Machines are built by humans, and humans have faults, and so if one of those faults is the decision to keep using the password, unfortunately. So not to get too philosophical, but it's a problem that we need to solve, and it's a problem that companies like HYPR and companies like ForgeRock and several others are working very hard to do.
And I would just like to highlight one final aspect on this topic, is that relating back to how can the IAM platform help you with this. And for the IoT side, I would say that IoT needs to be a first-class tenant in your IAM platform. If it's not designed for that, it's going to be hard to easily address this specific attack surface.
So thanks for the insight there. And one of the last questions for today's discussion is, what is the passwordless decade, and how are we going to get rid of passwords?
Yeah, this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. It's something that I feel like, as a cybersecurity practitioner, we have put off for far too long. It's something that has to happen if we want to protect our businesses and we want to protect our friends and our family. Unfortunately today, most of the technology industry is built on top of passwords, and it just so happens that most of the passwords that people use on a day-to-day basis have been stolen. You may put an exclamation point at the end of your password every 90 days when you need to change it, but that's pretty trivial for bad guys to figure out. The fact is, we're using a technology that is decades old, and we wouldn't feel safe getting in a 60-year-old car and driving across the country, but we for some reason still keep using the password. And it's no secret that most of the breaches that occur today happen because of lost or stolen passwords. As long as the human is the primary person responsible for security and remembering a credential to provide that security, we're going to have issues. So, not just from a security perspective, our businesses today spend millions of dollars every single year, and that's both Australian dollars and American dollars. Spend millions of dollars every year on just password-related costs. I was speaking to an executive at a large financial institution, and we mentioned to them that, hey, based on our research at HYPR, we estimate that your employees probably spend about 24 to 36 hours every single year just dealing with passwords, authenticating, resetting passwords, so on and so forth. And he sat back in his chair and really looked at us like we were crazy, and he said, actually, you're wrong. It's probably double that amount. And this is an organization that has 250,000 employees. So you multiply 250,000 by even the optimistic number, which is 24 hours, and you have tens or hundreds of millions of dollars being spent just on managing passwords. And so this situation that we find ourselves in today, it's not ideal by any means. We know it's not ideal, and as security practitioners, it's our responsibility to really move beyond it. And the way that we see that happening is a number of ways, but the primary way that we see this happening is changing the philosophy of how we access things. And this includes our mobile applications, our web applications, but also our IoT devices like Johan mentioned. And today, unfortunately, the authentication technologies that we depend on, like passwords, one-time passwords, the rotating codes, so on and so forth, these are all based on the concept of a shared secret. And this concept is, basically keeping a centralized database of credentials. This is this little diagram that you see on the left here. Where you have some server within your organization or somewhere on the cloud where all of your passwords and one-time password secrets are stored centrally. And when you have this type of architecture, it really creates a situation where you have a single crown jewel within your organization that bad guys are motivated to target. When you have a single target that is worth a lot of money, it's worth significant effort, months or years worth of time to put into it in order to breach that target. So this is why this architecture that we have today is so expensive to defend, because it's so valuable. And it's really easy to attack because of all the stolen passwords in the past. So what we have to do fundamentally is we have to transform the way that we do security. And the way that we do that transformation is by moving to a different architecture that is really expensive to attack and really easy to defend. So what we do and what we're doing as an industry, and we'll talk about this quite a bit in the upcoming slides, is moving to an architecture that does not rely on a centralized credential store. And this is something that's going to be very important moving forward, because it's a fundamental shift in the way that we access the things that we rely on every single day. Johan, what's your familiarity with the FIDO Alliance and how you've seen it be successful in your day-to-day work?
Thanks, Bojan. I think in almost every single interaction we have with prospects and customers, the FIDO comes up. It comes up in RFPs, it comes up in day-to-day dialogues. And I think finally we have that one unifying accepted standard that everybody seems to agree on. Even one of the larger tech vendors out there making phones and other devices is going to support this. So I think that is great news for the industry. We get a common point around web authentication for how we can take advantage of the underlying secure FIDO authenticators. And this is happening today. And you can start using it today. We support it, HYPR supports it, and I would argue that any IAM department in an organization really need to start wrapping their heads around how to apply passwordless, how to leverage this common standard that we now have in the industry, and put it to good use starting today.
And Bojan, any tips on this to help drive some adoption?
Yeah, FIDO is a critical step towards eliminating passwords, and it is an open standard, and we've seen many open standards have varying levels of success. So if you recall back to the early 2000s, when SAML started gaining traction as an open standard, many organizations and many companies cropped up to try to basically provide this standard to the greater business world as something that is deployable and to help them move away from this situation where they have many passwords for many applications to now just having one password to access all their applications. And so this is where we see leading technologies like ForgeRock, for example, really providing capabilities for businesses that scale. Because if you're a financial institution or something similar, you have tens of millions of users. You want to rely on a solution that can scale to meet the needs. And with regards to open standards like FIDO, not everybody these days has dozens of developers or hundreds of developers sitting around just doing nothing. Anytime you look to implement any sort of technology, you want to get extremely quick time to value. In 2020, it's no longer the days of purchasing a piece of software if you're a business and then taking 1, 2, 3 years to start using it. These days software is very different. The moment that you acquire the technology, you're expected to start using it very quickly. So while FIDO is an open standard, what we see in terms of adoption, the companies that are able to move beyond the password fastest are the ones that choose the technology partners that are able to get them the quickest integration and the best user experience. Because unfortunately, the password has been around for 60 years. And the reason that it has been around for such a long time is because it's easy, it's familiar. And most people, unfortunately, don't seem to like too much change. The only time that they are willing to accept change is if you make their life much easier. And by moving away from the password, by leveraging open standards like FIDO, we provide our customers with better security, but we also provide them with a easier user experience than the password. Most people don't have very secure passwords, 8, 10, 12 characters if you're lucky. Your passwordless authentication solution needs to be easier than typing in that 8-character password. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult getting meaningful adoption. So it's all about the user experience. And it's all about how easy is it to plug this into your existing applications and your existing software that doesn't require, months of development effort by your software engineering team, something that can be done very quickly.
And Johan, what are some of the key things that make ForgeRock so well suited for enabling this type of technology?
I think there are a couple of things that stand out. One is the openness, which allows for quick and rapid integration of in this case, passwordless technologies from HYPR. The other part, which I'm glad that Bojan brought up, is user experience matters. It is sort of key. And with ForgeRock technology, you're able to define and configure what the user journeys would be for authentication, for authorization, for registration, etc., and add the technology component at the appropriate time. So it's easy to keep your, as a business, unique user journeys, because I would argue that they are competitively differentiating your business by having great journeys. So with ForgeRock, you can keep the look and the feel and the smell of your business, and at the same time adding this extra convenience and security at the appropriate points. So that integration and flexibility are key tenets to drive this adoption today.
Yeah, thanks.
And I also think, looking at this as well as we touched on, is that with FIDO and web authentication, there is such broad industry support for it. And as Bojan was alluding to, we've seen many open standards come and go, and they haven't, for whatever reason, gained widespread acceptance. Could be cost, complexity, or just politics, right? Now I'm delighted in a way to see that across the industry, across the major platforms from a tech point of view, so operating systems and browsers and roaming authenticators, etc., we have a standards layer to build on. And also with the ease of integration in your business's processes and journeys, will in a way see this go, and excuse the choice of words here, go viral. I think the passwordless technology based on FIDO is something that will rapidly drive adoption to the mass markets, as well as in enterprises, without being something that you need to have a 1, 2, 3 year initiative to do. It's ready, it's here today, technology is here, the platforms are here, so it's time to start implementing, not just thinking about it, but truly start to implement passwordless solutions into your services.
Yeah, I've been involved in the FIDO Alliance for over 5 years now, and I've had an opportunity over the last couple of years to be on the board, and it's not very frequent in any industry where you see the biggest service providers like Google, or you see the biggest device manufacturers like Apple, and you see the biggest hardware chip manufacturers like Intel and ARM come together to solve a common problem, and that problem is the password. And so this is why I truly believe that we are in the passwordless decade, and we see this happen across several primary use cases. So the use cases where we see this type of transformation happening initially is twofold. So if you're going to get rid of the password, you have to do it for all parts of your business. So the two primary parts of any business are business units, our consumers, are the individuals that consume the technologies that we build and the services that we provide as an industry. And two is our employees themselves. It's critical that our customers feel safe and that they have the security and the best user experience that they can get. And it's also important for our businesses to protect our intellectual property. And getting rid of the password and moving beyond the password is critical for both of these use cases. So, we want to, talk about both of these scenarios tonight, and we're going to be demonstrating some of those as well.
So, Bojan, can HYPR Solutions serve both SIAM and workforce use cases?
Absolutely, yeah. So at HYPR, when we started the company 6 years ago now, we initially started the business primarily for the consumer use case. And about 3 years ago, we actually started and we brought to market a solution for the workforce as well. And this is because, we started providing our customers on the consumer side with passwordless technology, and they liked the user experience so much that they said, hey, could you please build something like this for our employees, because we really enjoy the user experience and we really like the security. So we actually decided to build a workforce solution and take a bit of a different approach, which we'll demonstrate later, where we really aim for those primary use cases where people feel the most friction as employees with regards to passwords and shared secrets.
And Johan, what about ForgeRock and our capabilities for enabling SIAM and workforce?
Definitely being a one single platform serving both type of user segments helps with this, obviously. But there's one point that I think is important. This is, and Bojan, you touched on it. I think as an employee, you deserve what I often call a consumer-grade experience in how you authenticate and authorize and get access in your work life as well. And I think that many times the best authentication and or identity journeys in general come from the consumer side, because if you don't get it right there, your customers will go away. And I think with a modern workforce as well, we want to give our staff and employees the same treatment. Of course, upholding the security policies, etc. But from an experience point of view, it needs to be simplified. It needs to be more secured, and it needs to be more relevant to the day-to-day activities. And I think taking a cue from the consumer side is definitely the right way to go. And we see things like people bringing their own devices. I mean, typically phones, etc. People bring them in with them, and they want to use it for both the personal and work life as well. So having familiarity in how they authenticate and interact with systems is critical. I don't think a modern workforce will tolerate archaic, cumbersome procedures just because it's the work environment. And also with unifying on technologies like passwordless, addressing your zero trust beyond core Carta requirements get, in my opinion, a bit easier, because you have an underlying secure foundation, a more secure foundation than you had for your centralized credential store. So I think there are many aspects of technology that will and platforms that will help you to define really good and secure journeys for both consumers and employees as well.
Thank you.
So with that, I will just quickly get into the demo part, and I'm not going to go through this slide in any detail, but what we're going to show you is basically two experiences for your users. One is a consumer journey, and the other one will be a employee journey. And what we're touching on, what underpins this, a couple of things. One is the choice of how you authenticate as a user. And the second one, which is really important and a big cost saver in the enterprise, is also to avoid having to specifically have a set of credentials for each and every application. You consolidate, you have your digital identity that is recognized across your application landscape, and then you have a secure, convenient, frictionless means of using passwordless authentication to get access to the services that you require. So what I am going to do now, I'm going to live on the edge to some extent. I'm going to do a live demo. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we are going to see, hopefully, how the this could look like for a user. So what I'm going to do here is that I am going to use our banking application, which I have enrolled in as a user. I'm going to sign in, and then I'm going to authenticate in a passwordless fashion. So just want to give you this feel for how easily this is done, and how convenient it is. You will see my iPhone on your right. I'm going to sign in as Johan. I'm going to continue, and if all the networks and all of that is collaborating now, we're going to get a push notification coming out to my HYPR authenticator. It's going to ask me, do you want to log into ForgeRock? I'm going to say, okay. It's going to use my enrolled Face ID, in this case, credentials. And I am successfully logged in to my demo bank platform in this case. And with the ForgeRock platform as well, we, as we indicated earlier, we are aware of the context. So in this case, we will know that I used HYPR as my authentication. I have done a number of risk assessments. And as you can see, I've been making sure the demo was working. So we assess a set of signals during the journey and assign, let's call them authentication values to this session. And then we can take actions that if, let's say, I get a score, a risk score of above 50, for example, then I would take some means and measures to revalidate that it's Johan accessing it, or I would perhaps deny access, so on and so forth. So this shows the ease of integrating the technology and then taking advantage of that to make a much more convenient and less friction user journey available to the consumer. Going to go back now to the slides here. And there we go. So Bojan, what would it look like in an enterprise, like a desktop login setting? Would the experience be vastly different, or would it be similar? I think we know the answer, but let's see.
Yeah, let's show. There's also a couple of questions that are being asked, so I do want to make sure that I get to those. But I want to get to at least the first one during my demo. There's a concern, of course, that as we move to primarily using the mobile device as our primary authenticator, hey, devices can be copied, they can be stolen, and so on and so forth. And that's a valid concern. The good news is, I mentioned earlier that there is a combination of device manufacturers and platforms coming together to create this secure, frictionless environment. And one of the key innovations in the last several years has been the fact that devices, primarily mobile devices as well as laptops, have put in dedicated hardware like TPM chips, secure enclaves, trusted execution environments to do the management of keys in order to ensure that those keys that are used for authenticating the user cannot be copied or cloned from device to device. And if your device is stolen, most of your devices have one or more types of biometrics in order to protect the usage of that device. And you also put the bad guys in a position where, in order for them to get one access to a single account, they have to go after each device individually. So when we put the bad guys in this kind of situation, we essentially make it economically infeasible for them to execute any sort of massive attack that is based on credentials. But now that we've gotten that question out of the way, and we'll get to the second one as well, which is also a great question, I want to show you how true passwordless authentication looks like for an employee, somebody accessing their desktop, which is something that they do usually dozens of times per day. We've observed people in banking environments, behind, inside the branches themselves, tellers authenticating sometimes to their computer and typing in a password over 100 times in a single day. So we want to show you what it looks like here with HYPR. So in this demonstration, what you'll see is this is the user's Windows machine, and then the user has their iPhone, in this case, in their hand, but this works on any device. So the way that HYPR works is, and this is a very quick demo, authentication usually takes only a couple of seconds. What you'll see is that the user uses their mobile device as a remote control for their computer, essentially. And the way that it works is all they need to do is they just select their computer on their phone, they authenticate on their phone, and then they're given access to their machine. So it is initiated by their mobile device. So you could be coming back from the cafeteria, coming back from the kitchen, grabbing a snack, and you just authenticate on your phone, select your computer, and you log in. And this works in all enterprise environments and doesn't rely on anything like Bluetooth connections, which many businesses have disabled on their corporate machines. And it provides you that single sign-on into your desktop. So what happens here in this authentication is the user is actually authenticated to their domain. So the user gets a valid Kerberos ticket. They would have single sign-on into all of their applications that support certificate-based authentication, and they have a strong authentication method into their desktop, and this is considered multi-factor because it's the something you have, which is the device key, the FIDO key that is on your mobile phone, and the something they are in this case, which was their biometric. So this is a multi-factor authentication into your desktop, which can then be transferred to your VPN or whatever other services that you may be using behind this. So I will stop sharing there. But before I do that, actually, there was another question. The question was, in this evolving passwordless decade, what do you think is the future of PAM solutions? And PAM solutions, for those of you unfamiliar, are privileged access management solutions by companies like CyberArk, Thycotic, and BeyondTrust, who sell products to keep the passwords safe and in a vault. So what we've seen in instances where companies have PAM solutions like CyberArk, for example, is they will require a passwordless authentication into CyberArk. And then usually what they will do is they will maintain service account credentials in those PAM solutions. So if you have, for example, a database credential or a service account, or maybe you have some AS400s, machines that haven't been updated, or software that hasn't been updated in 10, 15 years, and the last person who even looked at the code, quit 6 years ago. We'll see companies using those PAM solutions for those types of systems. But for the most part, any solution or any technology within an enterprise that uses single sign-on, any solution that uses the Radius protocol or Kerberos or any of those mechanisms, such as VPN or even SSH, we see companies moving to a passwordless solution to access those types of systems.
Yeah, thanks, Bojan.
So I'll go back to the slides.
So look, that was pretty insightful, and I really do appreciate the time, Bojan, and also the viewers as well. We did get a couple more questions as well, and I just wanted to ask you this. I mean, I think this one might have been triggered by the whole logon experience with you, Bojan. But what if a user forgets his or her mobile phone somewhere and then stops? Would that stop them from being able to authenticate?
No, you know, so it's normal for people to lose phones. Fortunately, people lose their phones far less frequently than they forget their passwords, statistically speaking. So the problem, there's always going to be a problem with a lost credential, right? So the problem is going to go from I forgot my password or I lost my password to I lost my phone or I lost my authentication device. The good news is that users can register multiple devices with their accounts. So for example, I have my company iPhone registered, I have my personal Android phone registered, and I also have an iPad that sits on my coffee table that I have registered to my accounts. Since I'm a technologist, I also have several hardware tokens like YubiKeys because I'm a nerd. But you know, so I would rarely find myself in a situation where all my devices are lost or stolen. But any solution like HYPR or our integration with ForgeRock, for example, any enterprise-grade solution will have a fallback mechanism. It will have a secure way for you to break glass and still get access to your account in the event, you know, the system is not working as anticipated, or the person doesn't have an internet connection, you know, or they lost all of their devices. And so this is, you know, HYPR, for example, has solutions for such problems. And we can certainly help you with those if you have additional questions.
So another quick one that's just come in while we've still got some time is, can passwordless authentication be added to legacy applications without rewriting them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the cool thing with ForgeRock, our platform, is that you can inject, if you so wish, modern authentication methods like passwordless in front of your legacy applications. So you will expose a modern, shiny, efficient, secure surface, and then maintain, if required, the legacy style of interacting with the system that you are getting access to. So that could be with credential injection, header injection, etc. But the key point is you can add new technology like passwordless in front of those applications, have ForgeRock orchestrate and take advantage of that to make the access decisions required. So in short, the answer is yes, you can. You can add it to your legacy application without touching the applications themselves.
And the last question I think that we have time for today is, what do you think the immediate benefits organizations can reap by providing passwordless authentication options?
I think there is one that is obvious, and Bojan touched on this one as well. It's the cost of managing password resets, forgotten passwords, and that customer service center cost or the help desk cost. I think that is one really ripe cost-saving measure, and obviously also the benefit of reducing the attack surface. Doing that can have huge implications on risk avoidance. So I think those two should be top of mind when you embark on your passwordless transformation journey.
Awesome. Look, that's all we have time for today. So again, thank you, presenters, and thank you for those that have tuned in. If you did have any other questions, please, you've got our emails there on the slide packs. Reach out, and also, as I said at the beginning of the webinar, the assets will be available, and the video recording is also available as well, and will be sent out. So look, thanks again, and I'm going to close it there.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.